The recycled air tasted stale, carrying the bitter tang of failing filtration systems and the acrid smell of fear. Chiron pressed her three-fingered hand against the cold viewport, her silver eyes reflecting the endless darkness outside. Behind her reflection, she could see the other 47 members of her crew moving through the cargo bay that had become their prison. Some huddled in small groups, their pale blue skin taking on an unhealthy grey tint. Others sat alone, lost in private thoughts that Chiron suspected mirrored her own despair. The cargo hauler distant promise was dying, and they were dying with it. Chiron closed her eyes and tried to remember how it had started. 3 cycles ago, they had been heading home to the Varantian colonies, their holds full of rare minerals and processed goods. The journey was supposed to be routine, the kind of run Chiron had made dozens of times in her 8 years as captain. The hyperspace lanes were well-traveled, the navigation beacons reliable, and the distant promise was barely 6 years old, practically new by freighter standards. Then the accident happened. A micrometeorite strike, 1 in a billion chance, had torn through their hull in the engine compartment. The automated systems had sealed the breach, but not before the hyperspace drive had suffered catastrophic damage. They dropped out of faster-than-light travel in the middle of nowhere, light years from any established route, with nowhere to call for help beyond basic subspace broadcasts that might reach someone in a month, if they were lucky. The first 2 days had been a flurry of activity. Chief Engineer Mortek and her team worked around the clock, trying to repair the drive with whatever spare parts they could cannibalize from other systems. Chiron had sent out distress calls on every frequency, detailing their position, their supplies, and their desperate situation. The communications officer, young Pelra with her bright optimism, had assured everyone that help would come. But help never came. By the end of the first week, Mortek had delivered the news that broke their spirits. The hyperspace drive was beyond repair. Even if they had unlimited time and resources, the damage was too severe. They were stranded. Chiron had made the hardest decision of her life. She ordered the crew to ration everything: power, food, water, air. They shut down entire sections of the ship, huddling together in the cargo bay where they could share heat and conserve resources. The mathematics were cruel but simple. If they stretched everything as far as possible, if they reduced physical activity to minimal levels, if they were willing to slowly starve and suffer, they might last 40 days. That was 3 weeks ago. Now, as Chiron opened her eyes and stared at the stars, she felt the weight of those 47 lives pressing down on her. 47 crew members who had trusted her judgment, who had followed her orders, who had believed she would bring them home. The youngest was Pelra, barely 19 standard years old. The oldest was Mortek, a grandmother who showed everyone pictures of her 7 grandchildren every chance she got. They would all die out here. The Varantian people had a saying, "The void gives nothing, takes everything." It was one of the first lessons taught to children who dreamed of space. The galaxy was filled with thousands of spacefaring species, and all of them knew the same bitter truth. When a ship went down, when a crew sent out distress calls, civilized societies did not respond. It was not cruelty. The politicians and ethicists explained it was survival. Space was too big, too dangerous, too unpredictable. Rescue missions cost enormous amounts of resources. Ships had to be diverted, crews had to risk their lives jumping into unknown situations, and for what? To save strangers you had never met, who would likely be dead before you arrived anyway? The math never worked out. A civilization that squandered its resources on futile rescue attempts would not survive long in the harsh reality of space. Better to accept that loss was inevitable, that ships sometimes disappeared, and that the best policy was to encourage redundancy and preparation. Every species accepted this. The great concordat of civilized worlds had even codified it into law. Article 7, subsection 3 stated clearly that while humanitarian assistance was encouraged within established territories, no member species was obligated to respond to distress calls in uncharted or remote space. The reasoning was sound. The logic was unassailable. The practice was universal. Chiron had agreed with it her entire life. She had never questioned the wisdom of letting the lost remain lost, until she was the one lost. Captain? Chiron turned from the viewport to see her first officer, Jexal, approaching. His movements were slow, conserving energy, but his eyes held the same determination they always had. In another life, Jexal would have made an excellent captain. He had the intelligence, the calm under pressure, the ability to make hard choices. Chiron wondered if he blamed her for their situation. "What is it, Jex?" she asked, her voice hoarse from weeks of breathing thin air. Pelra picked up something on the passive scanners. It's probably nothing, but she wanted you to see it. Chiron followed Jexal across the cargo bay, stepping carefully over crew members who were sleeping or simply lying still to conserve energy. They had dimmed the lights to save power, creating a twilight gloom that matched everyone's mood. The makeshift communications station was tucked into a corner, a jumble of jury-rigged equipment that Pelra had somehow kept operational. The young communications officer looked up as they approached, and Chiron's heart ached at the hope she saw in those silver eyes. Pelra still believed someone might come. Even now, even after weeks of silence, she still hoped. "Captain, look at this!" Pelra gestured to her screen, where a series of wavelengths and frequencies danced in complex patterns. "I've been monitoring all bands just like you ordered." This showed up about an hour ago on one of the ultra-long-range sensors. Chiron leaned closer, squinting at the data. Her people had excellent vision, adapted for their dim home world, but exhaustion and hunger were making everything harder. "What am I looking at?" "It's a signal," Pelra said, her voice rising with excitement. "Not natural cosmic radiation, not a pulsar or quasar. It's artificial. Someone is broadcasting." "How far away?" "That's the strange part. The signal is incredibly strong, which means it should be close. But I'm not picking up any ships on our scanners, no heat signatures, no mass readings. It's like the signal is coming from nowhere." Jexal leaned over Chiron's shoulder. "Could it be an automated beacon? Maybe an old navigation buoy?" "No, sir. The pattern is too complex. And it's directed. Whoever is broadcasting is sweeping this region of space very deliberately." Chiron felt something stir in her chest, something she had not felt in weeks. It was not quite hope, not yet, but it was no longer the crushing despair that had become her constant companion. "Can you interpret the signal? Figure out what it's saying?" Pelra's expression fell. "I've tried, Captain. It's not using any known protocol. The encoding is completely foreign. I can't even identify what language or species might be behind it." "Then it could be from anyone," Jexal said quietly. "Or anything." They all knew what he meant. The galaxy was not just home to civilized species who followed the Concordat. There were pirates, raiders, and things worse. Automated defense systems left behind by extinct civilizations, xenophobic species that killed on sight, viral intelligences that hijacked ships and turned them into hunting grounds. A strange signal from an unknown source in deep space was not necessarily a good thing. But what choice did they have? Chiron straightened up, ignoring the dizziness that came with the movement. "Pelra, respond to that signal. Use our own basic mathematical sequences, universal constants, anything that might establish we're intelligent, life-seeking contact." "Captain, is that wise?" Jexal asked carefully. "We don't know what's out there." "No, we don't," Chiron agreed. "But we know what happens if we do nothing. We die out here, slowly and painfully. At least this way, we have a chance." Jexal studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Understood, Captain." Pelra's fingers flew over her controls, sending out a carefully crafted response. They waited in tense silence, watching the screen for any change. The seconds stretched into minutes. Chiron was about to turn away when suddenly the signal changed. It became focused, intense, locked directly onto their position. "They heard us," Pelra whispered, her voice filled with wonder. "Captain!" "They heard us and they're responding." New data flooded across the screen, a cascade of information in formats and structures that made no sense to Chiron's eyes. Pelra worked frantically, trying to decode at least some of it. After several minutes, she let out a small gasp. "What is it?" Chiron demanded. "I was able to pull some basic information from their signal. Mathematical constants, physical measurements. Whoever is out there, they're trying to communicate using universal principles." Pelra pointed to a series of numbers on her screen. "These appear to be coordinates." "They're telling us where they are." "Or where they want us to go," Jexal said darkly. "We can't go anywhere," Chiron reminded him. "Our engines are barely functional for maneuvering. We certainly can't reach any significant destination." "Then why would they send coordinates?" Pelra asked. The answer came 30 minutes later when alarms began blaring throughout the cargo bay. Crew members jerked awake, confusion turning to fear as the lights flashed red. Chiron sprinted to the nearest terminal, her heart hammering despite her weakened state. "What's happening?" she shouted to Mortek, who was already at the engineering station. "Mass reading," the old engineer called back. Something big just appeared on our scanners. I mean, really big, Captain. It's about 300,000 kilometers away and closing. Closing? How fast? Fast. They'll be here in less than an hour at current velocity. Chiron pulled up the scanner display and felt her breath catch. The object was massive, easily 10 times the size of the distant promise. Its profile was unlike anything in the concordant databases, all strange angles and asymmetric design. Power readings were off the charts, and the heat signature suggested engines that dwarfed anything Varantian technology could produce. Unknown ship is hailing us, Pelra announced. Audio only. Put it through, Chiron ordered. Static filled the cargo bay. Then a voice emerged. It was strange, with odd inflections and a rhythm that felt alien yet somehow warm. But the most shocking thing was that the voice was speaking Varantian Standard, accented, slightly mangled, but unmistakably her own language. Attention disabled vessel. This is Captain Maria Chen of the human ship Indomitable Spirit. We received your distress call and are en route to your position. Please respond if you are able to do so. The cargo bay fell into stunned silence. Chiron stared at the communications panel, unable to process what she had just heard. Someone had actually come. After weeks of silence, after all hope had died, someone had actually answered their call. But the word human meant nothing to her. She had never heard of such a species. Jaxal found his voice first. Captain, should we respond? Chiron shook herself, trying to think clearly through the haze of exhaustion and shock. A strange alien ship was approaching, piloted by an unknown species that somehow spoke their language. Every protocol, every piece of training she had received, screamed at her to be cautious. But what was the worst that could happen? If these humans meant them harm, they were too weak to resist anyway. And if they truly were here to help, then refusing to communicate would be insane. Pelra, open a channel, Chiron commanded, her voice steady despite the chaos in her mind. She took a deep breath and spoke. Human ship Indomitable Spirit, this is Captain Chiron of the Varantian cargo hauler Distant Promise. We copy your transmission. Our ship has suffered critical damage and we are stranded. Our supplies are nearly exhausted. We have 48 crew members aboard. There was a pause. Then the human voice returned. Understood, Distant Promise. We are coming to get you. Hold on, Captain. Just hold on a little longer. Nobody dies alone in space, not while humans are watching. Chiron felt something crack inside her chest. Some wall she had built to keep functioning in the face of death. Nobody dies alone in space. The words were impossible. Absurd, completely contrary to everything she knew about the galaxy. But as she looked around the cargo bay at her crew, at the faces turning toward her with questions and desperate hope, she found herself believing the humans were coming, and somehow, impossibly, everything was going to be different. The human ship was beautiful in a way that made no sense to Chiron's engineer mind. Where Varantian vessels prioritized efficiency and symmetry, this massive craft seemed to embrace chaos. Irregular sections jutted out at odd angles, sensor arrays sprouted like mechanical flowers, and the hull bore scars and patches that suggested countless repairs. Yet somehow, it all worked together in a design that felt alive, adaptable, almost organic in its asymmetry. Through the Distant Promise's viewports, the crew watched in silent awe as the Indomitable Spirit maneuvered closer. The human ship could have swallowed their cargo hauler whole, yet it moved with surprising grace, retro thrusters firing in precise bursts to match their drift velocity. Captain! Mortek called from her station, her voice filled with wonder. Their power output is fluctuating in ways I've never seen. It's like their reactor is breathing, and the radiation signature doesn't match any known drive system. What kind of engines are those? Chiron shook her head slowly. I don't know. Add it to the list of things we don't understand about these humans. The communications panel crackled to life again. Captain Chiron, this is Chen. We're positioning for docking procedures. Our medical team is standing by, and we've prepared space for your entire crew. I need you to understand something before we make contact. We use different atmospheric mixtures than you based on the chemical analysis of your distress broadcasts. Our life support systems are adapting sections of our ship to match your requirements, but it will take a few minutes after docking. Understood, Chiron replied, her mind racing. They were altering their own ship's systems to accommodate Varantian biology? That kind of environmental flexibility was extraordinary. Most species carried portable atmosphere generators for such situations, but reconfiguring an entire section of a starship on the fly suggested technology far beyond what the Concordat possessed. "One more thing," Captain Chen continued, and Chiron detected a new note in her voice. Was it nervousness? "My crew has been briefed to expect significant malnutrition and dehydration in your people. They're trained for this. We're going to take care of you, but I need you to trust us. Some of what we do might seem strange or even aggressive by your cultural standards. Can you help your crew understand that we mean no harm?" Chiron glanced at Jexal, who wore an expression of deep confusion. Trust strangers who had appeared from nowhere? Accept help that violated every principle of interstellar relations? Let aliens with unknown biology and culture take control of their welfare? What choice did they have? "We understand, Captain Chen. My crew will cooperate fully." "Good! Stand by for docking!" The crew of the distant Promise gathered near the main airlock, too weak to stand for long but driven by curiosity and desperate hope to witness this moment. Chiron could hear whispered conversations, crew members speculating about these mysterious humans, wondering what they would look like, whether they could be trusted. Young Pelra stood near the front, her silver eyes wide with equal parts fear and excitement. "Captain, do you think they're really here to help, without wanting anything in return?" It was the question on everyone's mind. In the Concordat, nothing was free. Trade was the foundation of civilization, and every interaction involved some exchange of value. The idea that strangers would expend enormous resources to rescue 48 unknown aliens without negotiating compensation first was fundamentally alien to everything Chiron had been taught. "I don't know what they want," Chiron admitted honestly, "but we're about to find out." A series of mechanical clangs echoed through the hull as the human ship's docking collar made contact. The sound was different from Varantian equipment, heavier, more robust. Chiron watched her console as pressure equalized between the two vessels. The humans had perfectly matched their atmosphere to Varantian requirements. Perfect oxygen levels, ideal humidity. Even the temperature was set to comfortable standards. It was the kind of precision that spoke to either incredible technology or meticulous care. Probably both. The airlock cycled open with a hiss of equalizing pressure, and Captain Maria Chen stepped through. Chiron felt her breath catch. The human was tall, taller than any Varantian, with a build that suggested both strength and endurance. Her skin was a warm brown tone that seemed to glow with health, such a stark contrast to the sickly grey blue of Chiron's malnourished crew. Dark hair was pulled back in a practical style, and her eyes were a deep brown that seemed to take in everything at once. She wore a uniform of dark blue with patches and insignia that meant nothing to Chiron but spoke of rank and authority. Behind Chen came more humans, at least 20 of them, carrying equipment and supplies. They moved with purpose and efficiency, but their faces showed something Chiron had not expected to see. Concern. Real, genuine concern for the strangers before them. One human, a male with pale skin and red hair, knelt immediately beside an elderly Varantian engineer who had collapsed weeks ago and never regained strength. He pulled out a device that projected a soft scanning light, his hands gentle as he examined her vital signs. "Severe malnutrition, stage 3 dehydration," the human muttered, his voice thick with an emotion Chiron struggled to identify. Was it anger? Grief? How long have they been like this? 3 weeks, Chen answered quietly. Maybe longer. Get her on an IV immediately. Electrolytes first, then we can start nutrition once her system stabilizes. Chiron watched in amazement as the humans moved through her crew with practiced efficiency. They produced portable medical devices from their equipment packs, scanners that mapped Varantian physiology in seconds, adaptable IV systems that automatically adjusted to alien biology. But it was not just their technology that shocked her. It was their attitude. Every human who touched a Varantian crew member did so with gentle care. They spoke in soft, reassuring voices, even though most of the crew could not understand their language. They smiled. They made eye contact. They treated each starving, desperate alien with the kind of respect and compassion usually reserved for family members. Captain Chen approached Chiron, and up close the human was even more imposing. Not threatening exactly, but powerful in a way that went beyond mere physical size. Yet when Chen spoke, her voice was warm and kind. "Captain Chiron, I'm Maria Chen. It's an honor to meet you, though I wish it were under better circumstances." She held out her hand in what Chiron recognized from their database as a human greeting gesture. A handshake, meant to show peaceful intentions through mutual vulnerability. Chiron extended her own three-fingered hand, and Chen's grip was firm, but careful, adjusted instinctively to match Varantian's strength, or lack thereof, in Chiron's current state. "You came," Chiron said, and hated how her voice cracked. "I don't understand why, but you came." Chen's expression softened. "You sent out a distress call." "What else would we do?" "Not answer it," Jexal spoke up from beside Chiron, his voice edged with suspicion. "That's what every civilized species does. It's the law. It's common sense. You don't risk your ship and crew for strangers in deep space." A flash of something crossed Chen's face. Not anger, but perhaps disappointment. "Is that really how it works out here? You just let people die?" "It's not about wanting them to die," Chiron said quickly, feeling an inexplicable need to justify their civilization to this alien. "It's about survival. Space is too big, too dangerous. The resources required for rescue missions in uncharted space are enormous. A society that squanders its resources on futile rescue attempts will not survive." Chen was quiet for a moment, studying Chiron with those deep brown eyes. Then she said softly, "Maybe. Or maybe a society that abandons its own in the void isn't worth surviving." Before Chiron could formulate a response to that unsettling statement, Chen turned to address the assembled crew. She raised her voice, speaking clearly in accented but understandable Varantian. "Listen up, everyone. My name is Captain Maria Chen, and I'm in command of this rescue operation. Here's what's going to happen. My medical team is going to take care of each of you. You're malnourished, dehydrated, and exhausted. Treatment is going to take time, but you're all going to be fine. We have food, water, medical supplies, everything you need." She paused, making eye contact with various crew members. "I know you're scared. I know you don't understand why we're here or what we want. That's okay. We're going to transport you to our medical bay, get you stable, and then we can talk. For now, just know this. You are safe. Nobody on my ship will harm you. You have my word as a human and as a captain." One of Chiron's crew, a cargo handler named Vextor, called out in a weak voice, "Why should we trust you? What do you want from us?" Chen smiled, and it transformed her face from imposing to genuinely warm. "Right now, I want you to stop starving. Everything else can wait." Over the next hour, the humans performed what could only be described as miracles. Portable medical bays were set up right there in the cargo hold, sophisticated equipment that could analyze Varantian biology and provide treatment on the fly. IV lines were inserted with such skill that even the most dehydrated crew members barely felt the needles. Nutrient solutions began flowing, carefully calculated to reintroduce calories without overwhelming systems that had been starving for weeks. Chiron watched a young human woman, barely older than Pelra, working with the communications officer. The human's name was Sarah, and she spoke in a gentle, soothing voice while checking Pelra's vital signs. "You're doing great," Sarah said, even though Pelra could not understand the English words. The tone alone conveyed comfort. "Your body is fighting hard. You're strong. You're going to be okay." Pelra responded in Varantian, tears streaming down her face. "I thought we were going to die. I thought nobody cared." Sarah could not understand the words, but she understood the emotion. She held Pelra's hand, squeezed gently, and just stayed there, present, caring, real. Chiron felt her own eyes burning with tears she refused to shed. Not yet. She was still the captain, still responsible for her crew. She could break down later. Captain Chen approached with a medical officer, a tall human male with kind eyes and graying hair at his temples. "Captain Chiron, this is Dr. James Rodriguez, our chief medical officer. He'd like to examine you." "I'm fine," Chiron protested automatically. "See to my crew first." "Your crew is being treated," Rodriguez said in careful Varantian, his accent even thicker than Chen's. "But you're the captain. You've been putting everyone else first, taking smaller rations, working longer hours. I can see it in your metabolic readings. You're in worse shape than most of your crew." Chiron wanted to argue, but the room suddenly tilted sideways. Strong hands caught her before she fell. Human hands. Chen on one side, Rodriguez on the other, lowering her gently to a cushioned surface that had not been there a moment before. "Easy," Rodriguez said softly. "Your body is running on empty. Let us help." Chiron felt a cool sensation in her arm as an IV line was inserted. Almost immediately, relief began flooding through her system. Her thoughts cleared slightly, the fog of exhaustion lifting just enough for her to think straight. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered, looking up at Chen's face hovering above her. "Rescues like this must cost millions of credits. The fuel alone for your engines, the supplies, the risk to your crew. Why?" Chen was quiet for a moment. Then she pulled up a portable chair and sat beside Kyron's makeshift medical bed. "Do you know what it's like to be alone, Captain? Really, truly alone? To know that nobody is coming, that nobody cares if you live or die." "Yes," Kyron said, her voice barely audible. "Now I do." "Humans have been there," Chen continued, her voice distant, remembering. "Back when we were confined to our home planet, we had disasters. Earthquakes, floods, fires, accidents, and every single time people would rush toward the danger, not away from it. Firefighters would run into burning buildings. Rescue workers would dig through rubble. Ordinary citizens would form human chains to pull strangers from floodwaters. That's insane," Jexal muttered from nearby. "Risking your life for people you don't know?" Chen smiled. "Maybe, but it's who we are. When humans reached space, we brought that instinct with us. We set up monitoring stations, relay networks, emergency response teams. Any human ship that detects a distress call is legally obligated to respond, not because it makes economic sense, not because we expect anything in return, but because out here, in this vast emptiness, we're all just trying to survive, and we survive better when we know someone will come if we're the ones calling for help." "But we're not human," Kyron said. "We're strangers, aliens. We don't even look like you." Rodriguez spoke up, his hand steady as he adjusted her IV flow. "When I see your crew, I don't see aliens. I see people. Scared people who need help. The shape of your hands or the color of your skin doesn't change that basic fact. Your concordat has it wrong," Chen said firmly. "Space might be vast, but that's exactly why we can't afford to be alone in it. Every species that makes it to the stars should be celebrated, protected, helped when they need it. Because we're all fighting the same enemy out here. Entropy. Chaos. The cold, uncaring void. And the only way to win that fight is together." Kyron closed her eyes, overwhelmed by exhaustion and emotion, and the sheer cognitive dissonance of everything happening around her. The humans were wrong. Had to be wrong. Their philosophy was unsustainable, naive, childish. You could not build a civilization on compassion for strangers, could you? She drifted in and out of consciousness over the next few hours. Each time she woke, she saw humans working tirelessly among her crew, feeding them, hydrating them, treating injuries and illnesses that had gone unaddressed during their weeks of rationing, speaking in gentle tones even when they were not understood, never asking for anything in return. At one point, Kyran heard Mortek talking with a human engineer, comparing notes on reactor designs with the help of a translation device. The human was explaining their drive system, sharing technical specifications freely, without any of the usual paranoia about proprietary information or competitive advantage. At another point, she saw several humans sitting with a group of Varantium crew members, sharing pictures on portable devices, images of families, homes, alien landscapes that must be Earth. The humans were smiling, laughing, treating these strangers like old friends reuniting after a long separation. When Kyron finally woke fully, she found herself in a proper medical bay, tucked into a comfortable bed with monitoring equipment humming softly around her. Dr. Rodriguez sat nearby, reviewing data on a translucent screen. "Welcome back," he said, when he noticed her eyes open. "You've been out for about 6 hours. Your body needed the rest. How do you feel?" Kyron took inventory. The constant gnawing hunger was gone. The exhaustion that had weighed on her like a physical burden had lifted. Her thoughts were clear for the first time in weeks. "Better. Much better, my crew. All stable," Rodriguez assured her. "Everyone is responding well to treatment. Another few days of supervised recovery, and you'll all be back to normal." "Well, normal for people who survived 3 weeks in deep space on minimal rations. You're all incredibly tough. Where are we?" "On the Indomitable Spirit. Your ship is safely docked in our external bay. We're currently en route to the nearest human relay station, about 4 days away at standard cruise speed. From there, we can arrange transport to get you home to Varantian space." Kyron sat up slowly, and Rodriguez moved to help her, adjusting her bed to a comfortable position. I need to see my crew. I need to know they're really okay. Of course. Let me help you to the recovery ward. The recovery ward was a large open space that had been reconfigured to match Varantian environmental preferences. Soft lighting, comfortable temperature, air that tasted clean and fresh. Her crew was spread throughout the space, some sleeping peacefully, others sitting up and talking quietly. The transformation from the desperate, starving people she had seen in the cargo bay was remarkable. Pelra saw her first and called out in excitement, "Captain, you're awake!" Heads turned, and Kyrene found herself surrounded by her crew. They looked like themselves again. Color had returned to their skin. Their eyes were bright and alert. They moved with energy instead of the careful conservation of the dying. The humans had done this. In less than a day, they had pulled 48 people back from the edge of death. "Captain," Jaxal said quietly, pulling her aside, "we need to talk about what happens next." "What do you mean?" "The humans have been nothing but kind to us, but we can't stay on their ship forever. We'll need to negotiate terms for our transport, compensation for their rescue efforts, repayment schedules. This rescue probably cost them millions. Our company will need to know the full extent of our debt." Chiron nodded slowly. It was the practical thing, the civilized thing. "You're right. I'll speak with Captain Chen about arrangements." She found Chen on the bridge, a space that seemed to embody the chaotic functionality of the human ship. Multiple stations were manned by humans of various appearances, all working together with practiced coordination. Screens displayed information in formats Chiron barely recognized. But the atmosphere was relaxed, almost casual, with crew members chatting as they worked. Chen smiled when she saw Chiron enter. "Captain, good to see you on your feet. How are you feeling?" "Much better. Thanks to your crew." "Captain Chen, we need to discuss compensation." Chen's smile faded into confusion. "Compensation for what?" "My company will need to know what we owe you." There was a long moment of silence. Then Chen said slowly, "Captain Chiron, you don't owe us anything." "That's impossible. This rescue must have cost you enormous resources." "It did," Chen agreed. "But that's what our resources are for. Helping people. Saving lives. We don't charge for that." Chiron felt her legs weaken again, but this time from shock rather than malnutrition.
You can't be serious!
"Nobody provides this level of service for free. Humans do," Chen said simply. "It's not free, exactly. It's paid for by everyone through our combined resources. Every human ship contributes to the rescue fund. Every human colony supports the relay network. When one of us needs help, all of us provide it. And we extend that same principle to anyone who needs it, human or not. What do you gain?" Chen walked to the main viewport, gesturing at the stars beyond. "What do we gain? We gain a galaxy where people don't die alone in the dark, where species help each other instead of abandoning each other, where civilization means something more than just survival of the fittest." She turned back to Chiron, and her eyes held a fierce intensity. "We gain the knowledge that when our own ships are in trouble, someone will come for us too. Not because they expect payment, but because it's the right thing to do." Chiron stood there, trying to process words that should not make sense but somehow did. The humans had just proven that everything she believed about interstellar civilization was wrong. Not because they were naive or stupid, but because they had chosen a different path entirely. And it worked. It actually worked. The 4-day journey to the human relay station gave Chiron time to observe a civilization that should not exist by every rational standard she knew. Every morning she woke in comfortable quarters that had been prepared specifically for Varantian biology. Every meal, she ate food that human nutritionists had carefully formulated to rebuild her strength without overwhelming her recovering digestive system. Every conversation, she encountered humans who treated her not as a rescued alien who owed a debt, but as a fellow sapient being, deserving of respect and care. It was unsettling in the most profound way possible. On the second day, Captain Chen invited Chiron to join her for what the human called coffee, a bitter earth beverage that Chen seemed to consume in alarming quantities. They sat in an observation lounge, where massive viewports showed the stars streaming past at faster-than-light speeds. The human hyperdrive was remarkable, smoother and more efficient than anything in the Concorda databases. "You've been avoiding me," Chen observed, her tone casual but her eyes sharp. Chiron wrapped her 3 fingers around the warm cup Chen had given her. filled with a Varantian tea that the human food synthesizers had somehow replicated perfectly. "I've been thinking," she admitted. "About what?" "About how the entire Concordat has built its civilization on a philosophy that you've proven is flawed." Chen took a long sip of her coffee. "I wouldn't say flawed. Different, maybe. Your approach has its own logic. But it leaves people to die," Chiron said bluntly. "We left ourselves to die, and we thought that was normal, acceptable. The cost of living among the stars." She looked directly at Chen. "How long have humans been spacefaring?" "Our first faster-than-light ship was launched 143 years ago," Chen replied. "We've been exploring the galaxy for about a century and a half." "That's nothing," Chiron breathed. "My people have been traveling between stars for over 3,000 years. The Concordat itself is 2,000 years old, and in all that time, across thousands of species and millions of ships, nobody thought to do what you do." "How is that possible?" Chen was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "I think it's because most species reach space after they had already become comfortable with letting people die. You had wars, disasters, diseases that killed millions. You learned to accept death as inevitable, to prioritize efficiency over compassion. By the time you reached the stars, that mindset was so deeply ingrained that you just carried it with you. And humans didn't? Oh, we had all of those things," Chen said with a bitter laugh. "Wars that killed hundreds of millions, diseases that devastated continents, disasters that wiped out entire cities. But something was different about us. We never got comfortable with it. Every single death felt like a failure, like something that should have been prevented. It made us a little crazy, honestly." She pulled out a small device and projected images in the air between them. Chiron saw humans in orange suits running into burning buildings, humans in boats pulling strangers from floods, humans in protective gear treating patients during plagues, humans forming chains to pass supplies during famines. "This is what we were like before we left Earth," Chen continued, "rushing toward danger to save strangers, spending enormous resources on rescue missions with low chances of success, organizing global efforts to help people halfway around the planet who we would never meet. It was inefficient, expensive, and sometimes futile, but we couldn't stop doing it. Why not?" Chen met her eyes. "Because every single person we saved mattered more than the cost. Because the moment you start calculating whether someone deserves rescue based on resource expenditure, you've stopped being fully human. At least, that's what we believe." She dismissed the projection and leaned back in her chair. "When we reached space, we had a choice. We could adopt the Concordat's model, the rational approach of abandoning the lost to conserve resources. Or we could stay true to who we were and extend our insane compassion to the stars. We chose the latter." "But how do you sustain it?" Chiron demanded. "The costs must be staggering. The rescue of my crew alone probably consumed enough resources to fund a small colony for a year." "True," Chen admitted, "but here's what you're missing. Yes, individual rescues are expensive, but do you know what's even more expensive? Building a civilization where everyone is afraid to take risks because they know nobody will help if things go wrong. Where innovation is stifled because failure might mean death. Where ships stay close to established routes because venturing into the unknown is too dangerous." She gestured around them. "The indomitable spirit is an exploration vessel. We chart new hyperspace lanes, investigate anomalies, make first contact with isolated species. Our crews signed up knowing the risks. But they also know that if something goes wrong, the entire human fleet will move heaven and earth to bring them home. That certainty, that trust makes them braver, more willing to push boundaries. And the discoveries they make are worth far more than the occasional rescue operation." Chiron felt something shift in her understanding. "You're not being irrational. You're making a different calculation." "Exactly. We're investing in trust instead of hoarding resources. In the long run, it pays off in ways that pure efficiency never could." Over the following days, Chiron watched that philosophy in action throughout the ship. She saw a human engineer named Marcus spend hours teaching Mortek about their reactor design, freely sharing information that should have been proprietary. When Mortek asked why, Marcus just shrugged and said, "Knowledge should be shared. Maybe someday Varantian tech will teach us something new. Rising tides lift all ships, you know." She saw Dr. Rodriguez organizing sessions where human crew members taught Varantians basic medical techniques, first aid skills that could save lives in emergencies. You never know when you might need this, Rodriguez explained. Better to spread the knowledge around. She saw Pelra bonding with Sarah, the young human medic, using translation devices to share stories about their respective homes. They laughed together despite barely understanding each other's languages, finding common ground in the universal experiences of youth, dreams, and uncertainty about the future. But perhaps most striking was what happened on the third day. When alarms suddenly blared throughout the indomitable spirit, Chiron rushed to the bridge, heart pounding, fearing the worst. Had something attacked them? Was the ship failing? She found Chen calmly coordinating with her crew while reading from multiple displays. "Report!" Chen ordered. "We've picked up a distress signal," the human communications officer announced. "Automated beacon, species unknown, approximately 40 light years off our current course. Signal is weak and intermittent. Might be pirates using it as bait, or might be genuine." Chiron expected Chen to ignore it, to prioritize getting the Varantian crew to safety. That would be the rational choice, the responsible choice. They already had 48 rescued aliens aboard. Taking on more was absurd, but Chen did not hesitate. Set course for the signal. Battle stations, just in case it's a trap. Medical team, prepare for possible casualties. Engineering! Maximize our engine output! The human crew moved immediately. No questions, no objections. They were going to respond to that distress call, despite the risks, despite the costs, despite already being on a rescue mission, because that was what humans did. Chiron approached Chen's command chair. "Captain, you don't have to do this. You have obligations to my crew, getting us safely to the relay station. We'll get you there," Chen assured her. "Just might take a little longer." She glanced at Chiron with a slight smile. "Besides, how would I live with myself if we ignored someone calling for help? How would my crew?" The distress signal turned out to be genuine. A small ship, damaged and drifting, carrying a family of Kryn traders, insectoid beings Chiron had encountered a few times in concordate space. They were terrified when the massive human ship approached, but Chen's crew handled the situation with the same gentle efficiency they had shown the Varantians. Within hours, the Kryn family was aboard, receiving medical care and provisions. The father, a large being with iridescent carapace, kept asking through translation devices what the humans wanted in payment. Chen kept telling him nothing. The confusion was almost comical. That night, Chiron found Jexel in one of the observation lounges, staring out at the stars. Her first officer looked troubled. "You're thinking about going home," Chiron said, sitting beside him. "I'm thinking about what we're going to tell people," Jexel corrected. "When we get back to Varantian space, when we report what happened, the board of directors is going to ask why we're alive. The government is going to want to know about these humans. And we're going to have to explain that everything we believe about space travel is wrong." "Is it wrong?" Chiron asked softly. "Or have we just been too afraid to try something different?" Jexel turned to look at her. "You're actually considering this. Changing our entire society's approach to rescue operations. The humans have proven it works. Not just for them, but for anyone willing to adopt their philosophy. Look at this ship, Jex. We're here. The Kryn are here. And nobody is talking about debts or compensation. We're just people who needed help. And people who gave it." "The Concordat will never accept it," Jexal warned. "The economic models, the risk calculations, the entire legal framework is built around non-interference. You'd be fighting 2,000 years of established doctrine." "I know," Chiron agreed, "but I can't go back to believing that it's acceptable to let people die in the void. Not after experiencing this." She gestured around them. "The humans are right, Jex. And if one species figured this out in just over a century of spaceflight, maybe others can learn it too." On the final day before reaching the relay station, Captain Chen called a meeting in the main conference room. All of the Varantian crew who were well enough attended, along with representatives from the Kryn family. Human crew members lined the walls, and Chen stood at the head of the table with Dr. Rodriguez beside her. "I wanted to gather everyone together before we reached the station," Chen began, "because you all deserve to understand something about humanity and our place in the galaxy." She activated a holographic display showing a star map. Blue markers indicated human territory, a relatively modest section of space. Green markers showed the vast reach of the Concordat. Red markers indicated species that were hostile or isolated. Yellow markers represented unexplored regions. When humans reached the stars, we expected to find civilizations that shared our values. Chen continued, we thought rescue operations, mutual aid, and collective security would be universal principles. Instead, we found the Concordat. Her expression hardened slightly. An alliance of thousands of species who had all agreed that it was acceptable to let each other die. She touched a control, and the map shifted to show incident markers scattered throughout space. These are distress calls that Concordat ships detected and ignored over the past decade. Each one represents lives that could have been saved. Thousands of individuals from hundreds of species abandoned because helping them didn't make economic sense. The room was silent. Even the human crew members looked grim. We tried to change things peacefully, Chen said. We petitioned for the Concordat laws to be revised. We offered to share our technology, our rescue protocols, our economic models showing that mutual aid actually increases overall prosperity. We were rejected every single time. The Concordat told us we were naive, irrational, that we would bankrupt ourselves within a generation. So what did you do? Chiron asked quietly. Chen smiled, and it had an edge to it. We ignored them. We set up monitoring stations throughout Concordat space. We respond to every distress call we detect, regardless of what the Concordat says. We've rescued over 3,000 individuals from 47 different species in the past 5 years alone. And do you know what happened? She touched the display again and new markers appeared. Green markers scattered but growing throughout Concordat territory. Some of the people we rescued decided they liked our way better. They went home and started advocating for change. Small groups at first, then larger movements. Species that had accepted the Concordat's philosophy for thousands of years, suddenly questioning it. More markers appeared, these ones orange. And some species broke away from the Concordat entirely, forming their own rescue networks modeled on human principles. They're small, scattered, not nearly as developed as our own systems, but they exist. Because once you show people that there's a better way, once you prove that compassion and efficiency aren't mutually exclusive, some of them will choose compassion. Chiron felt her heart racing. You're starting a revolution. We're offering an alternative, Chen corrected. What people do with that choice is up to them. But yes, we're hoping that eventually, the entire galaxy will realize that we're stronger together than apart. That civilization should mean more than just survival. She looked directly at Chiron. When you reach the relay station, you're going to have options. We can arrange transport back to Varantian space. No questions asked. You can return to your company, file your report and go back to life as normal. Or, she paused, letting the word hang in the air. You can stay at the station for a while, learn about human systems, see how our rescue operations work, meet representatives from other species who have chosen to adopt our philosophy. Then go home and tell your people what you learned. You want us to be advocates for change, Jexel said, understanding dawning in his eyes. I want you to make an informed choice, Chen replied. You've experienced both systems now. You know what it's like to be abandoned, and you know what it's like to be rescued. Whatever you decide will ripple outward, affecting your company, your government, maybe your entire species. That's a heavy responsibility, and I won't pretend otherwise. Mortek spoke up from across the table, her voice steady. What about the Concordat? If we start advocating for human-style rescue operations, they'll resist. The established powers have too much invested in the current system. They will resist, Rodriguez agreed. Change is always opposed by those who benefit from the status quo. But the beautiful thing about an idea whose time has come is that it spreads despite opposition. We've seen it happen with species after species. Once people realize they don't have to accept abandonment as normal, they start demanding better. Chiron looked around the table at her crew. She saw Pelra, young and idealistic, nodding eagerly. She saw older crew members like Mortek and Vextor, their expressions thoughtful and conflicted. She saw the Kryn father holding his child, understanding in his multifaceted eyes that his family's rescue was part of something much larger. I need to think about this, Chiron said finally. We all do. This isn't a decision to make lightly. Of course, Chen agreed. Take all the time you need. The relay station has facilities for extended stays. You're welcome as long as you want to remain. The meeting broke up, but Chiron remained in the conference room, staring at the star map floating in the air. Chen came to stand beside her. You're afraid, Chen observed. Terrified, Chiron admitted. What you're asking could destroy my career, maybe my entire life. The Concordat doesn't react well to troublemakers. I know, and I'm genuinely sorry for putting you in this position. But Captain, you're alive right now because we refuse to accept the Concordat's philosophy. Your entire crew is alive. The Kryn family is alive. That matters, doesn't it? Of course it matters, Chiron said, her voice fierce. But changing an entire galactic civilization? That's impossible. Humans were told space travel was impossible, Chen said with a slight smile. We were told faster than light travel was impossible. We were told building a civilization on mutual aid was impossible. We keep hearing that word, impossible, and we keep ignoring it. She placed a gentle hand on Chiron's shoulder. You don't have to change the galaxy, Captain. You just have to tell the truth about what happened to you, about what it felt like to be abandoned, and what it felt like to be rescued. The rest will follow, slowly maybe, but inevitably. The relay station was magnificent, a massive structure floating in deep space, home to thousands of humans and representatives from dozens of species. Chiron and her crew were given comfortable quarters and full access to the facility. True to Chen's word, there was no pressure, no demands for payment, just an open invitation to learn and observe. Over the next week, Chiron attended briefings about human rescue operations. She saw the economic models that proved mutual aid was not just morally superior, but financially viable. She met representatives from 8 different species who had adopted human-style rescue networks and were seeing positive results. She watched real-time rescue operations being coordinated, human ships responding to distress calls throughout this sector of space. And slowly, inevitably, she began to believe. On the 8th day, Chiron gathered her crew in their shared common area. I'd made a decision, she announced. I'm not going directly home. I'm staying here for at least another month, learning everything I can about how humans make this work. Then I'm going back to Varantian space, and I'm going to tell everyone who will listen that we've been wrong. Jexal nodded slowly. I thought you might say that. So did most of the crew. We've been talking, Captain, and we want to support you. If you're going to advocate for change, you shouldn't do it alone. You don't have to risk your careers for this, Chiron protested. We're already implicated, Mortek pointed out with a dry laugh. The moment we survived and came home, we became walking proof that rescue is possible. Might as well embrace it. Pelra bounced forward, her youthful energy fully restored. Besides, Captain, we've seen the alternative. We've lived it. How can we go back to believing that abandoning people is acceptable? How can we look our families in the eyes and not tell them there's a better way? Chiron felt tears burning in her eyes, but this time she did not try to hold them back. I'm so proud of all of you. So proud to have been your captain. You still are our captain, Jexal said firmly. And you're going to lead us through whatever comes next. When Chiron informed Captain Chen of her decision, the human captain smiled with genuine warmth. I'm glad, though. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't hoping for this outcome. The galaxy needs voices like yours, Captain. People who have experienced both systems and can speak to the difference. I don't know if I'll be able to change anything, Chiron admitted. The Concordat is powerful, entrenched. My testimony might not matter. It will matter, Chen assured her. Maybe not immediately, maybe not in ways you'll see. But every voice raised for compassion makes the next voice easier. Every species that breaks from the Concordat model makes the next break more likely. This is how change happens, Captain. One rescue, one testimony, one converted believer at a time. She extended her hand for another handshake, and Chiron took it firmly. Thank you, Chiron said simply, for saving my crew, for showing us that our civilization was wrong, for giving us hope. Thank you for being brave enough to listen, Chen replied. Not everyone is. Now go learn, then go home and tell your story. The galaxy is listening, even if it doesn't know it yet. 3 months later, Chiron stood before the Varantian Trade Commission, the governing body that regulated all commercial spaceflight for her species. Her crew sat behind her, a show of solidarity. Her testimony had been broadcast to millions of Varantians across their colonies, and the reaction had been explosive. Some called her a hero, others called her a naive fool. But everyone was talking about it. In conclusion, Chiron said, her voice steady despite her nerves, I submit that our current policies regarding rescue operations are not just morally wrong, but economically short-sighted. The humans have proven that mutual aid networks actually increase overall prosperity by encouraging risk-taking and innovation. I propose that Varantia establish a pilot rescue program, modeled on human systems, to determine if such approaches could benefit our people. The commissioner, an elderly Varantian with deep blue skin and calculating silver eyes, studied her coldly. Captain Chiron, what you propose would require massive expenditure of resources for uncertain benefit. The humans are an anomaly, a young species that has not yet learned the harsh lessons of resource management. Their philosophy will not scale to a civilization as old and established as ours. With respect, Commissioner, I disagree. I've studied their economic models extensively. I've seen their rescue networks in operation. It works not because they're young and naive, but because they understand something we've forgotten. That trust is a resource, and compassion is an investment that pays dividends in ways pure efficiency never can. Pretty words, the Commissioner said dismissively. But words don't feed colonies or power ships. No, Chiron agreed, but neither does letting your people die in the void. Commissioner, I'm not asking you to revolutionize our entire society overnight. I'm asking you to try. To run a pilot program. To test whether human methods could work for us. If I'm wrong, if it proves unsustainable, then we can return to our current policies with no harm done. But if I'm right, if even a fraction of what I've seen could be implemented here, then we have the opportunity to become something better than we are. Chiron could feel the weight of countless eyes upon her, watching through screens and broadcasts across Varantian space. This was the moment, the point where change became possible, or was crushed under the weight of tradition and fear. Finally, the Commissioner spoke. We will consider your proposal. The Commission will reconvene in 1 week to vote on whether to authorize a pilot rescue program. Until then, this hearing is adjourned. It was not the resounding victory Chiron had hoped for, but it was not a rejection either. It was possibility, fragile and uncertain, but real. As she left the chamber with her crew, Pelra squeezed her arm. You did it, Captain. You gave them something to think about. Maybe, Chiron said cautiously. But the fight is just beginning. She pulled out her communicator and sent a message to the indomitable spirit, currently stationed 3 sectors away on patrol. The reply came within minutes, Captain Chen's voice warm and encouraging. Heard about your testimony, Captain. The entire human fleet is proud of you. Whatever happens next, you've already made a difference. You've proven that one voice telling one truth can start to change the galaxy. That's more than most people accomplish in a lifetime. Chiron looked up at the stars visible through the building's transparent dome. Somewhere out there, Chen was continuing her work, responding to distress calls, rescuing the abandoned, proving day after day that compassion and pragmatism could coexist. Other human ships were doing the same throughout their territory. Species that had witnessed human rescues were questioning their own policies. The revolution was slow, incremental, but undeniable. And now maybe Varantia would join it. Chiron thought about her weeks drifting in the distant promise, convinced she would die alone in the void. She thought about the moment when human scanners had detected them, when someone had decided that 48 strangers in deep space mattered enough to risk everything. She thought about Chen's words. Nobody dies alone in space, not while humans are watching. That was the future Chiron wanted for the galaxy. Not the cold calculation of the Concordat, where death was acceptable as long as it was efficient, but a civilization where every life mattered, where helping strangers was not naive but noble, where compassion was not weakness but strength. She did not know if she would live to see that future realized. The Concordat was powerful, change was slow, and opposition would be fierce. But for the first time in her life, Chiron believed it was possible, because humans had shown her that impossible was just a word used by people who had given up too early, and Chiron was done giving up. She turned to her crew, to these people who had stood with her through death and rescue and rebirth. Come on, she said with a smile. We have work to do. The galaxy isn't going to change itself. Together they walked forward into an uncertain but hopeful future, carrying with them the most powerful force in the universe. The belief that things could be better, and the determination to make it so, because they had been abandoned in the void, until the humans detected them, and that had made all the difference.